Hey everyone, Justina Lee Stoltz here, your host for the Entry Point Hunting podcast. Today I'm excited to have Bill Hanlon on the show. Bill grew up in Trail, BC, and he now lives on an acreage in the Elk Valley with his wife Sue, where they raised their three children. He taught high school industrial education for 20 years before changing careers and starting his own woodworking business called Wilderness Spirit Woodworks. He is a wilderness hunter, backcountry horseman, and wilderness advocate, and has been involved with various conservation organizations for over 30 years in the East Kootenays. He was the first chair of the BC chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers and is presently in his second term on the BHA North America Board of Directors. He is also co-founder and current chair of the Hornaday Wilderness Society. And I'm excited to have Bill with me here today. Hey,
Hi,
Bill.
Justina. How are you?
Um, I'm good. I'm good. Did I pronounce that properly? Hornaday?
The
Hornady?
Hornaday, yeah, Hornaday
Ah,
Wilderness
yeah.
Society. Yeah, it's named after William T. Hornaday, who was a uh, great American conservationist who traveled to the Elk Valley in 1905 and wrote a classic book called Campfires in the Canadian Rockies, which is still an epic tale of sheep hunting and grizzly bears and wild country. And the most significant thing about that is that that country that he traveled 119 years ago is the same as it was, is the same today as it was then. So it
Oh,
hasn't
wow.
been mined or logged or dammed or burned or developed or roaded. It is still its most significant de facto wilderness remaining in the Kootenays. And again, that's where we got our name, Hornaday Wilderness Society, from.
Cool. Wow. There's a fun story just to kick it
There's
off.
a that's how we started off.
So maybe tell us a little bit more about you, Bill, before we jump into all of the things that you were involved in, and specifically sheep hunting by horseback. Tell us a bit about where you grew up and how you came into the hunting and conservation world.
Well, I guess I mean, my dad took us hunting as kids, or sorry, not hunting, sorry, fishing as kids. So I
Hmm.
never hunted growing up. And, my dad always said uh, he never owned a gun, he never owned a horse. He doesn't know what the hell happened to this kid. And he points to me, of course. And so I was an adult onset hunter. I didn't start hunting till after university.
Cool.
And my best friend was best man at my wedding, and I was best man at his wedding. And he got me into hunting with his elk hunting mentor. And again, we started hunting hard right from the beginning. I mean, the mantra of our mentor was, if you want to kill elk, you got to sleep on the mountain. So that's what we
Mm.
did. We left the track, we backpacked in, and slept on the mountain. And we're very successful in our early years of hunting. I was able to kind of develop my conservation ethic and my hunting ethic, as an adult. So I didn't have maybe some of those maybe positive or negative influences as growing up,
Mm.
as a hunter. So
Yeah.
that's
Nothing
how
to sway you
I
one
kind of
way or the other.
exactly. So I was able to develop my own, things under from my own perspective, and and started reading a lot of the contemporary writers of the day, conservation writers of the day, like Jim Posewitz, of course, David Peterson, Rick Bass. Like the list goes on. My
Yeah.
library is full of a lot of conservation writers that in the early '90s, late '80s, early '90s, there was kind of a hunting ethics revolution, I would say, and hunters started, or conservation writers started writing about, the why do we hunt? Like, what's the philosophical
Mhm.
and psychological reasons why people hunt? And they got into that, and I think that was, to be honest with you, I think that was the embryo of backcountry hunters and anglers,
Mm.
and just to have that land ethic, that hunting ethic, and written so eloquently by Jim Posewitz in Beyond Fair Chase and Inherit the Hunt, Rifle in Hand, Taking a Bullet for Conservation, and his autobiography is when you do it yourself.
Yeah.
My Best Shot,
Mm.
and Jim has passed away now, but he has left a legacy. Like, he's probably our greatest North American conservation hero, present day conservation hero.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's how I
amazing.
kind of got into. That's how I kind of got into it, and influenced by a lot of reading back then, and a lot
Yeah.
of hiking, a lot of exploring wilderness places.
That's cool. That's cool. I don't think many people start their hunting journey from the reading aspect of actually
Mhm.
taking the time to understand the, like you said, the why behind hunting or angling or being out on the land. So that's a different journey to get there.
And I was probably exposed to it. My claim to fame is I have every Bugle magazine, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation Bugle magazine ever printed, because I've been a member since 1986, and the
Wow.
organization began in 1984. And uh, they featured all those same writers I just mentioned. They had articles by those writers talking about the ethics of hunting and why we hunt, and stories about, like pursuing wild country, big game in wild country, and
Hmm.
all the attributes of that. So that's
Hang on to
and
those, Bill. The whole
I
collection will
sure
be
do.
worth
I
something
have
one
the
day.
entire collection, and I'm still a member, and I still get six bugles a year.
Nice. That's awesome. Um, so at what point did you I mean, sounds like you kind of got into big game hunting right off the bat. What point did you turn your attention towards sheep hunting, and then where along that journey did you also start hunting by horseback?
Um, yeah, good question. We started, like I said, my best friend. I was best man at his wedding. He was best
Mhm.
man at my wedding. 2 weeks after he got married, the two of us went on a hunting moon together. We were hunting stone sheep in northern BC, and our wives still remind us of that to
Yeah.
this day. And we just, again, it was just the next step in terms of looking for that challenge, looking for a bigger, wilder country than we had in the Kootenays here, even though that's
Mm.
how we hunted down here. So I think our first northern sheep hunting expedition was in 1993.
Mm.
Yes, 93. And our first trip was up off the Alaska Highway. We backpacked in off the Alaska Highway, and Mike shot an enormous ancient ram
Wow.
on our first northern sheep hunt. So we were baptized very quickly into our sheep hunting
Mm.
careers. And once you're on a ram like that, like there's no turning back. You'll have that distant look in your eye for the rest of your life.
It's kind of a blessing and a curse though, right?
It
You
is. It
you
is.
get a monster the first time you go out.
Yeah.
That's your expectation moving
Yeah,
forward. So
not necessarily your expectation, but
your hope.
you're infected, right?
Yeah.
You're now rabid in terms of that's all you think about, and your
Mhm.
year-round preparation for that next trip is your driving force.
Mhm.
Pretty much in everything, particularly in staying in shape and stuff like that for year-round to be able to do those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, especially when you're backpacking into
Hmm.
places. I mean, it's not like sheep live on the side of the highway and make it real
Yeah,
easy for you. So,
yeah,
backpacking, and you definitely, it's a, we've had Matt Ward on the podcast before, and he says hunting is a year-round exercise in staying fit.
absolutely.
It's not just
Yeah,
like 2 weeks before hunting season, I'm
yeah.
suddenly going to start
Oh,
doing
I should throw
cardio.
my pack on. Yeah, yeah.
And so is that kind of what led to you jumping onto horseback and being able to go farther? Because I mean, there's only so far you can go on foot.
Yeah, no, my horse journey started when I got married. Actually, I mean, I'd always been interested in horses. Um, my horse journey started when I married Miss Rodeo Canada, and so
Oh.
showed up with trailers and horses and tack. And sure, I had to ride a Miss Rodeo Canada saddle for the first few years, but I had broad shoulders, and it didn't matter. I
Hey
just
man, a
wanted
saddle's
to.
a saddle. It's better than
Yeah, a
bareback.
saddle is exactly. And so then, but again, she grew up on the prairies, and we had prairie horses, and I just had a desire to apply them to horse packing and apply them to wilderness travel, as opposed to rodeo circuit or just pleasure riding, but actual wilderness travel. So same thing, I met the right people, and some of those right people were the wrong people. In other words, they taught me things that I learned that's not how we do things. And uh, started again. I'm a big reader. I like to go back and look at the history of things. And the Horse Packer's Bible is called Horses, Hitches, and Rocky Trails by Joe Back. And I still recommend that to any new hunter or any new people that are interested in horse packing and horse hunting, is to get a copy of that and learn the traditions of horse packing from the
Mm,
beginning. Don't take any of your industrial gadget shortcuts to think that you're going to be put yourself into some wild places with a knot system where you're
mhm.
clicking buckles and that kind of stuff, because that's all you'll ever be able to pack.
Yeah.
Whereas if you learn the proper techniques for pack boxes and top packs and manti tarps and diamond hitches, then you can pack anything, and you just learn the intricacies of packing and the reasons why they were developed that way and evolved that way. I mean, I'm still using pack saddles that I bet you're 100 years old, and they still fit the conformation of the horses that I'm using.
Yeah.
And of course I've had to repair and modernize some of the harness or some of the, the britchin and breast collars and latigos and everything else. But the basic sawbuck hasn't changed. And there's been some improved models, but again, I started with the traditions and the basics, and learned what I felt was the right way. And it's the way the outfitters are packing to this day. And it enriches your experience as well. You become a student of it.
Yeah.
And so you're always learning.
Yeah, there's something to be said about, there is knowledge in the wisdom of the ages. Of course, there's always technological advances that make things nicer, like better socks and warmer clothes and all that kind of stuff. But some of the tooling and the setups are the way they are because they work, and they don't, if they're not broke, don't fix it kind of thing. And I think sometimes people want to just complicate stuff for the idea of selling a new product, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a modernized product.
Yeah. And I have a modernized pack saddle, and with the plastic bars and the metal sawbucks, and it fits fine. It's called it's called a humane pack saddle because it tends to flex a little bit and move and adjust with the conformation of the horse. But again, it's the same fundamentals of the old wooden sawbuck.
Yeah.
So and again, all the same rigging as well too. So
so maybe touch on.
I jumped into that really quick. Sorry about that.
Yeah. That's okay. Let's rewind just a hot second. And if somebody has never hunted by horseback and they're thinking about it, they're curious about what that would mean. What would be, or what have you seen as like the number one reason why people get into horseback hunting? And what would be some like fundamental basic things that you should have or should know before you do that?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is it's what you're going to want your lifestyle to be. It's a lifestyle choice because it's probably going to start with property. You're going to probably have to own some property and able to keep horses right outside your back door. So you can see them every day. I mean, if you want a good string of horses, you're seeing those horses every day. You're using those horses a lot. I'm talking about a personal, resident hunter, not an outfitter, where, you want to have access to your horses at all times. So it's going to begin with, a choice of lifestyle. If that's what you want to do, and then that's what you have to start pursuing. And it's going to take a lot of time for that to happen. Of course, you're going to need a good job, and you're going to need to find some affordable real estate, and you're going to be, of course, I mean, that's probably the biggest hurdle to anyone. But if you're going to board horses and get into it, you still can do that. And the learning curve to start learning about the disposition and conformation of horses is endless, and the kind of horses you're going to want to use or eventually learn about that are designed for mountain travel.
Is there a particular breed that is most common for?
Whatever's indigenous to your area, is kind of, I mean, is a worldview, but you look at northern BC. They have a lot of draft horses, draft crosses. They're bigger. They're
a lot bigger. Yeah.
A lot bigger. They're traveling in big, muskeggy, rough country, a lot of thick brush, a lot of big rivers to cross, those kind of things. So a bigger horse with bigger feet, so it floats a little bit better in some of that muskeg or some of that, boggy ground. As you get further south, the feet tend to start getting a little bit smaller. And you get into the U.S. where it's really rocky, some rocky country and stuff like that. There's a lot of mule usage. There's some mules in northern BC, but not very many. In the Kootenays, where I live, we're still mainly horses. There's a few mules. I mean, I've packed for outfitters for years, and they all seem to have a few mules in their string. In terms of breeds, anything that has a quiet mind. I mean, quarter horses are good, but they tend to bred the feet out of them, unless you find some big ranch, kind of big ranch geldings and mares. Morgans, I'm particular to Morgans.
Mm-hmm.
And even some of the northern outfitters are crossing those big drafts with Morgans just to get some vigor. They're a very vigorous horse.
Mm-hmm.
They walk out fast. They travel a bit faster. They're tough. They generally have very good feet on them. So
Mm-hmm.
you're having that bred into the stock you have.
Yeah.
So I have 5 horses right now. My main saddle horse is a big Morgan, a registered Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's horse is a Percheron quarter horse cross. I've got 2 Canadians, and I've got a Frisian Morgan cross, and they all got big feet, like all number, like my Morgan saddle horse has number 1 size shoes all the way around, which is a good size foot, but
Yeah.
all the rest of them have size 2s and 3s, which is a good size foot.
Yeah.
So you start looking at conformation of the horse in terms of bone, heavy bone, good solid feet.
When you say that, do you actually is it just by breed that you're assuming that? Or are you actually getting like scans and testing bone density on your horses?
No, just visually, you can see that
Okay.
it's got heavy bones. It's
Yeah.
got heavy bones. Good wither is another confirmation you look for.
Mm-hmm.
But all that stuff, you can do it with horses that aren't like that, especially when you're learning, especially when you're, to have horses and start applying them to horse packing and rough country. Then when you're getting started, the breed isn't necessarily the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're learning. You're going to be changing a lot of horses before you're taking a pack string into the head of the Prophet River.
Yeah.
But to be able to experience, local wild areas, local wilderness trails, then I wouldn't get caught up in the breed you have at the moment, as long as you have a good, quiet horse or a horse that you're going to be learning a lot about and from, is going to be your best teacher.
And would you recommend people get a horse from being a foal, or can you train horses that are already grown?
Both. The price of a horse depends on its training. So you either pay early or you
Mm-hmm.
pay later.
Yeah.
It's one, and that training is in time.
Yeah.
And so I've done both. I've bought ready to go turnkey horses where I can, once they get used to me and I get used to them and I understand what all their traits and everything. I've had those kind of horses, gone to the Saturday sale and come home with a horse. And I've also bought a horse as a foal, like as a weanling, right? And raised them with my kids. And so they were, and that's my main saddle horse now is this Morgan weanling that we bought. He'll be rising 18 this spring. So 18 years ago, we got him as a 6-month-old stud colt. And so he's been following us around like a puppy dog ever since. And now he's just a big, vigorous, hard charging, safe horse to be on in the mountains. He's not going to get me into trouble.
Wow.
And he's been everywhere. So
how long do I guess as just a general, how long do horses usually live? And if you're using them for something that's a bit more intensive like hunting, how long is that lifespan for them to be able to do that?
I think like people, if you keep them in shape, you can get a few more years out of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's no average. Once they start getting into their mid-20s, then you might have to kind of throttle back their heavy use a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Young horses, you can pick them out of the pasture all fat and they're going to get all sored up, but they're going to recover. Whereas an old horse is going to get stiff and sore and you won't be able to kind of just use them when you want to. You have to keep them in shape.
Mm-hmm.
My string right now, my wife's horse, 24 years old, and he's still in really good shape. We rode him yesterday. So he's in really good shape. He's that Percheron cross, so he's got all the attributes in the conformation to go with it. He's been in good shape. He's my number one horse. If I'm taking a friend that hasn't ridden much, I put him on old Ben, and he's looked after.
Nice.
My Canadians, they're both 12 years old, so they're in their prime. They're big, stocky horses. They're not even 15 hands tall, and they're probably 1,350 pounds. So they look like a little.
That's stocky,
little tank.
Yeah.
So it all depends. I put a horse down in the fall that raised all our kids, and our grandkids got to ride, and he was 34 years old.
Wow.
And he was the local 4-H and parade horse, up until a couple of years ago, and then he just didn't recover in the summertime. He usually fattens up in the summer, and we have to supplement him to keep him through the winter, but he didn't fatten up this summer. So it was time. He pretty much ran out of teeth. When they run out of teeth, they run out of time.
Yeah. I mean, you can't Yeah, unless you're gonna somehow spoon feed them, so to
Yeah,
speak.
no, no,
Yeah, without
yeah.
teeth, they can't
They
eat.
just can't. They can't crush, and they can't absorb the nutrition into their system. So
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Um, so tell us a little bit about then the connection between horse hunting and sheep hunting. Like why do those two go hand in hand so well for you?
I think I mentioned, like knowing the history of sheep hunting, those early pack trips for 70, 80 days, Jack O'Connor took and the Chadwick Ram and all that other kind of stuff, and knowing that some of that big country is still as wild as it was, back then it is today.
Mhm.
And to be able to take a string of horses, 250 kilometers into the wilderness, that's just the ultimate challenge as far as I'm
Mhm.
concerned. Backpacking it's very physically challenging,
Mhm.
but it doesn't have the same challenges as horse packing does to do that with a string of horses.
Yeah, like how
Um,
many horses are you taking when you say a string of horses? How many is that? And do you ever go solo on horseback, or is it always
yep,
with a couple
yep.
people?
No, I do a lot of solo horse packing myself.
Okay.
It's risky, but it's a calculated risk, and again, I trust my horses and I trust myself and my knowledge, and generally going into places I'm familiar with. I've
Mhm.
been back to numerous times, and so my horses know the trails. I know the trails.
Yeah.
Accidents can still happen, but
Yeah.
on these northern trips, I go with another partner, and say like last summer we took horses, and two of us took 6 horses. So we had a
Wow.
saddle horse each and two pack horses each, which
Yeah.
you can still travel a long way. You can carry, a good comfortable camp, and yeah, you're able to manage that. Two people are able to manage that many horses, so it's
Yeah.
not too bad. So that's not too
How
bad.
how long what's the shortest trip you've done and what's the longest trip you've done by horseback?
Shortest trips, I mean, day hunts and stuff like that. We
Yeah.
do a lot of day hunting on horseback, just in wild places around here. I tend to hunt 3 places. I hunt access management areas, which are your motor vehicle closed areas. I
Mhm.
hunt de facto wilderness, like the Hornady Wilderness, and I hunt provincial parks because those places are still wild. And there's been some, and they're not wild by accident.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of conservation efforts to keep those places wild. So those places are, like Aldo Leopold said, true wilderness can absorb a 2-week horseback trip.
Mhm.
And so some of those places we still have around here that, yeah, you'd be stretching it. You'd be going over the same trails a few times if you're going to spend 2 weeks. But northern BC, you can spend months in the backcountry and never see anybody and never see the same country twice. And
Wow.
so I've been, again, from day hunts to 21-day, probably 600-kilometer tours through the Head of the Prophet, Musqueam Rivers in northern British Columbia. Those are the two extremes of what I do with my horses.
Wow. And what would be the essentials to take if you're going to go on a horseback trip? Like if somebody's never done this before, they've, figured out their horse, they've worked and trained with their horse, and they're going out on their first horseback hunting trip. What
Yeah.
would you say would be the critical things that they should be aware of or bring with them?
Oh boy, we're jumping into stuff. If so, you have your saddle horse and what you need to hunt and to be, even to do a day trip on a saddle horse. And if you're fortunate enough to shoot something, then you can, pack it on your saddle horse and walk your saddle horse out.
Mhm.
If you have 2 horses, I mean, and generally not all horses trail out alone. Like you'll be, comfortable on a horse by itself in the backcountry. So you generally have, I mean, because of herd behavior and horse behavior, you generally have more than one horse with you for them to be most comfortable. My big Morgan will trail out alone, so I can leave my horses tied to a tree. But again, when I tie him up by himself, if I was to climb the mountain after a mule deer or a ram or something like that, and he's by himself, he's going to be nickering, he's going to be whinnying, he's going to make a lot of noise. So it's
Mhm.
not really, too beneficial to take a horse out by himself.
Mhm.
So what you have on your saddle horse, what you're going to need every day, is a good fitting saddle, both fitting down onto the horse and fitting up onto you, of course,
Mhm.
because it puts you in the proper position, so you don't soar your horse up or soar yourself up.
Mhm.
And again, lots of miles in the saddle is going to condition you to be conditioned to ride long distances. So
Mhm.
a good tack, a scabbard, of course, saddlebags for your essentials, which will include a water bottle, a flashlight,
Mm-hmm.
a slit, your maybe a saddle cover, your camera, first aid kit. I got some horse wrap in there. What else do I got in there? A lighter, fire starter, a few snacks, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and then my slicker that's tied on the back. I'll have an axe. So I have to chop. I usually have a saw as well. So I can, it's much more efficient than an axe if you're clearing trail or have to cut through some blowdown and stuff like that. So then your saddle horse is all ready to go. And then a pack horse, same kind of thing, tack that fits it properly. And pack bags are easy for a day trip. You can put your backpack in it. You can put in, an extra jacket or water bottle in your lunch bag or a
tent
thermos
and that kind of stuff. If you're going multi,
if you go in tent and that kind of stuff, you can still travel relatively light. I'm a backpacker that has horses now, so I've always tended to try to keep my amount of gear down that I pack with me. And again, that reduces the number of animals you have to take with you. So again, it reduces the amount of impact you have on the land and on the trails, and the amount of work you have when you're out there. Because every animal you add, that's another animal you have to look after.
Yeah.
And I mean, the gear list compared to, like, if we go on a northern backpack sheep hunt with a backpack, there's 50 pounds of gear in your pack for 10 days, gear and food. 10 days. I've been doing it since 1993. My pack's still 50 pounds. Regardless of all the technological advances, my pack is still 50 pounds.
Yeah.
And we can take a sedan. Two of us, 2 backpacks, 2 guns in the back seat, off we go. We can park the Honda Civic at the trailhead and away we go.
Yeah.
Now, if you're taking horses, now you got a 1-ton crew cab long box with a 22-foot gooseneck that is loaded to the gunnels. 800 liters of diesel fuel later, you're at the trailhead. And you're again, that's half the journey, is just getting all that and your horses to the trailhead. If you're hauling up northern, if you're hauling from the southeast corner of BC in Sparwood all the way to Toad River, for example, it's the place in the middle of nowhere. And just to get to the trailhead is your first big sigh of relief.
Yeah. You made it. Now you can start.
Now you made it. Now we're going to get started. Yeah. That's the first journey.
Yeah.
So you kind of break it down into bite-sized pieces. Let's get to the trailhead.
And
then let's get our horses packed up and into where our, first camp is. Cause that's usually where anything's going to happen, is when, when you're just getting your horses sorted out and getting on the trail, especially if they're new trails, and horses getting used to each other and getting all the kinks out, cause they're loaded heavy. You're going in, you got pretty heavy pack boxes going in. So if you were to start today from scratch, and to be able to do, I'd say, a northern horseback trip comfortably, efficiently, and safely, it would be probably 10 years from today that you're what would I say? I wouldn't say, qualified is not the word, but efficient, or having enough knowledge to be able to, and not only that, a comfort level to be able to do it, because that's what you're building at the same time. You're building a comfort level to be able to do, not just an overnight trip, but multiple day trips in pretty wild country that has some enormous obstacles. Like the intensity of northern BC is just over the top.
So when you say that 10 years, that's if you were to do it by yourself. But I mean, say somebody wants to do it, and then they find somebody like yourself who is a knowledgeable person who has that 20 to 30 years of experience already under their belt. I mean, you're obviously going to,
of course,
shorten down your time frame of maybe knowledge, but that comfort level would still be based on
exactly. But you'll be
experience.
Like, say, for example, if I was to take you on a 10-day horseback trip in northern BC right now, it'd be like a full-blown outfitted trip for you. And the person with the horses is doing all the work, doing all the worrying, doing all the anxiety, doing, like, it'd be 100% on their shoulders. And you'd have a very nice trip.
Cruisy.
And if you were enthusiastic and really wanted to learn, and then that's the kind of partner that crusty old packers like me are looking for. Somebody
Yeah.
that is enthusiastic, that wants to learn, because
Yeah.
the thing
That's
about
going to
horse
take off some
packing,
of that stress,
yeah, the
right?
thing about horse packing, it's not a trending activity. It's not
No.
something that is it's decreasing,
Yeah.
as we get estranged from nature. It's not increasing,
Yeah.
just because of the cost of owning land, the
Mhm.
cost of big trucks and trailers and tack and horses. I mean, horses are another COVID casualty. They are extremely expensive, and they haven't really come down yet very much.
Mhm.
Because the price really spiked during COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
For a good horse, if you want a turnkey operation, you're going to pay. It's going to cost you probably $6,000 to $10,000 to get into a horse that you can throw a leg over, and hopefully it's going to go down in the direction you want it to go in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the hope at that point. Um, so maybe moving a little bit away from the horse aspect. Although, okay, I have one burning question around that, and then I want to talk a little bit about sheep and your passion for sheep. With a horse, if you're on a horse hunt, you've made the successful trek to the start of the trail, you've made it to maybe your first camp, and you're out on a day actually hunting. Can you shoot from being saddled, or do you need to get off your horse and then go to a shooting position?
Only in Hollywood. Only in
Only in
Hollywood.
Hollywood. Okay. That's what I wanted to know, is the burning
I
question.
know one person that actually shot at a charging grizzly bear right through between the ears of his horse.
Oh my God.
And
Wow.
that's the
Okay.
only person, like I know that had to shoot off the back of a horse. We
Wow.
tie our horses up, like, again, it allows us access into some pretty wild places.
Mhm.
Once we have our camp set up, for example, I'll probably leave a couple pack horses behind and take a pack horse with me. So I'm not wearing my day pack on my back all day. Like a
Mhm.
hunting day pack is still 30 pounds of gear with spotting scopes and game
Yeah.
bags and cameras and everything else you got in there.
Yeah.
And so instead of carrying that all day, which is very hard on a horse because all that weight is over their kidneys,
Mhm.
which is right under the back of the saddle, you take that off your back, and you get to where you can sit in glass, to a glassing point where you can see a large landscape. And then from there, you take off on foot, or you ride your horse closer, you tie your horse up, and off you go hunting. So
I see.
I've never even had an opportunity at something riding down the trail to jump off my horse and shoot something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
You know,
imagine, I mean, even the quietest horse is still going to be
yeah. I mean, to
a
tie them
trigger
up,
of
and then,
noise.
yeah, if we spot an elk, like say 200 yards down the trail or up on a side hill, we tie the horses up, and then we can, sneak from there. But we're not trying to they're noisy. They're
Yeah.
snorting and farting and
Yeah.
barking and chirping and
And stomping and brushing
steam,
branches and yeah.
their shoes clacking on the rocks, and they're whinnying at each other. And yeah, there's a lot going on with a string of horses going down the trail.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You're not sneaking up on anything.
yeah, you're not sneaking up on anything.
Okay.
So
Well, I had to know, had to ask, So okay, so maybe talk to me a little bit about sheep hunting, because that's something you are super passionate about, outside of the horse hunting, and then the horses getting you to that. So, what's the big draw? You kind of mentioned like it's the thrill, the adventure, the challenge, but talk to me a little bit about why sheep hunting is such a thrill for you.
I think it's where we find our biggest challenge, and I think it's where we're putting ourselves into the most dramatic landscapes, for Dall sheep hunting in northern BC, of course, and that's another story for another day. But to when you're hunting glaciers, on foot, or into that big glacier country on horseback, it's pretty exciting. It's about as raw as it gets. It's about as immersed into the hunting process as I've found myself in,
Mm-hmm.
because we still have some of that country that you're still hunting sheep that haven't had their picture on Facebook yet. That's the kind of what I'm looking for,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
My goal this year is to find a ram that hasn't had his picture on Facebook.
Oh gosh, yeah, that I'm sure that gets harder and harder every year with the amount of people that
Yeah.
are adventuring further and further out and
Yeah.
into these more challenging hunting
Yeah,
conditions.
and particularly now that we have these proprietary systems, don't have to go into the different, trademark names and everything like that, that you can get totally outfitted from boots to underwear to packs to sleeping bags to tents, all with the same logo on it.
Mhm.
And head off into the wilderness with, go faster, further, longer, harder, safer, more
Yeah.
comfortable,
Yeah.
like
Cleaner, whatever,
yeah,
whatever.
whatever their is for that particular day.
Yeah.
And, so it's a trend, right? It's a trend. I think it's fueled by social media as well. Again, I don't think that's your best place to get information for like horse packing, for example. Sure, there's some great videos and all that kind of stuff, but as far as I'm concerned, it's more screen time, which is negative. Even if you're learning something, it's learning, meeting the right people, getting involved in backcountry horsemen, for example, and some of their packing clinics and those kind of things. Find some crusty old guy that's looking to pass on his legacy. And that legacy also includes, where the trails are, and where the wildlife is, and, where the game is, and these sheep ranges and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Maybe do you want to touch on a little bit about how the sheep populations are being impacted in the last few years? I know there's between hunters and disease, there's a lot of stuff going on for sheep. And we do have Pete from the Wild Sheep Society coming on next week to talk really more in depth about that. But maybe touch on what your experience has been, boots on the ground, what you've actually been seeing.
That's interesting. In the Elk Valley, to give you an example, which is the most industrialized valley in the province, but we also still have, a very rich wildlife resource. We still have some wild country. We've been able to kind of hold on to a few wild places. We're down to one roadless drainage, though. So, I mean, if that gives you an idea of the development in our country, it's called the Cumulative Effects Management Framework. And hunters are probably the least impact on our bighorn sheep. Road densities is enormous in terms of we don't have any sheep ranges remaining in the Kootenays that you can't see from a road. At some point, and if you know sheep hunting, it's all about seasonality. At some point during the season, from that road, you're going to see that ram range, and that ram's going to be standing there. And again, it's called wildlife vulnerability. Again, so that's an impact from hunting, but again, as a result of the road densities. If you were to take away, or have that road density reduced, so some of those ram ranges, you have to go in, and hunt in anticipation, and actually like you do in northern British Columbia, the wildlife it's far more fair chase, so to speak. It's not happenstance that I happen to be the guy that's standing on the road at this time when that ram shows up.
Lucky
that doesn't require any skill. It just requires to be on the right time, right place at the right time. Right. And that doesn't require, it requires a bit of knowledge because you know where to stop your truck to glass.
But it's just frequency. You show up every day.
You show up every day, and okay, eventually the ram's got to cross through here or whatever. But anyways, so cumulative effects, industry. We have these coal mines here, and they're having an enormous effect on sheep behavior. Again, that's part of the whole cumulative effects management framework, trying to identify what's called the valued components, which are bighorn sheep, grizzly bears, bull trout, west slope cutthroat trout, and old growth. And again, just looking at the most susceptible to all these effects, and those are the valued components, to try to measure to see what's impacting them and how, and then how we can mitigate it, or prevent it from happening.
Yeah. And I guess that kind of ties into some of the conservation work. So you sit on the national board for BHA.
North American board. Yep.
Yeah, the North American board. And there's a lot of progress and stuff happening there. So I don't know if you want to give a Coles Notes version, as we're coming closer to the end of the podcast now, but maybe a closer Coles Notes version of what's kind of exciting, or what's got you hopeful in 2024 that's happening in the conservation world, whether that's BHA or any of the other organizations that you're involved in.
Okay, let's start with BHA. Sitting on the North American Board of Directors, I was the first Canadian on the North American board. That happened because I was involved in bringing, the first Backcountry Hunters and Anglers chapter to Canada, so the British Columbia chapter. BHA is 20 years old this year, 2024. So we're having our 20th anniversary rendezvous in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I think April 18th to 20th weekend. British Columbia chapter is 10 years old. So halfway into BHA's lifespan, they expanded into Canada, and which was intentional from the beginning. They wanted to become a continental conservation organization. So we started the BC chapter, and we're very active in BC. Our chapter chair now is Al Duffy. I was the first chapter chair. I did that for 5 years, and then Al took over and just took off with it, and is involved in some very important initiatives that are happening in British Columbia right now, from the Together for Wildlife strategy, and establishing a regional wildlife and habitat advisory committees. Al's been very instrumental in being involved and getting that off the ground. The East Kootenay is the pilot project for the province to establish these wildlife and habitat advisory committees that advise government on wildlife management issues and habitat issues. We report to the minister, but also to the minister's Wildlife Advisory Council, which is the hierarchy within Together for Wildlife. As in terms of BHA Canada, there's been a lull in the action in Canada simply because we've applied to the Canada Revenue Agency for a federal nonprofit charity status. We are in the final stages of hearing if we have been approved. We sent in our final documentation and signatures and all that kind of stuff. And so we have a job description ready to advertise for hopefully our first hire. We're going to become back online from our, an independent or a Canadian portion of the BHA, website. All these things will be able to, money will be able to, cross back and forth across the border now, because we will have a way of creating this parallel entity that allows, us to have our own, autonomy in Canada, but, start looking at some continental issues like CWD, like invasive hogs, like bison reintroduction, like grassland restoration, like migratory birds, all these kind of things that don't know borders, right? And again, so I think as we, water quality in the Elk Valley is a prime example of working with the Montana chapter. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot yet to be developed. I think in the future for organizations like BHA, which has been 100% volunteer in Canada since its inception, to be able to have the capacity to stay on top of the things that we're involved in, membership and merchandise and events and everything else, despite all the issues we want to be informed on, not just opinionated on, but informed on. We need to build that capacity. And so that's once we have this approval for a federal nonprofit charity status, then I think we'll be off to the races and be able to build so that in 10, 20 years, then BHA is a legacy organization in British Columbia and in Canada for that matter.
Yeah, definitely. Very exciting to be steps away from having our own system that we can then implement and focus a lot on issues that are maybe a bit more Canada specific versus US specific. So that's very exciting for us.
And then developing something that resonates with not only Canadian hunters in each province, but in Canada as a whole kind of thing. And the United States BHA was able to capture that cultural moment with that whole public landowner, kind of campaign to recognize that 640 million acres in the United States belong to the people of the United States, and to fight for that, because their hunting and fishing opportunity is dependent on that public land.
Totally.
And again, that's going to define us in British Columbia with this whole, Land Act, amendment review, the Wildlife Act amendment review. I think we still have an opportunity to define or have a specific definition of who we are and what we represent in British Columbia. And that's still evolving, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to touch a little bit on any of the other organizations or things that are have exciting things happening that you're involved with coming up in 2024?
Oh, what do we got? Our like I mentioned earlier, our introduction was the Hornady Wilderness Society. Again, we're a small but effective wilderness advocacy organization in the Elk Valley. Again, named after William T. Hornaday, focusing on the area that he spent 1 month in 1905 and wrote a book about in 1906. And we have, through Recreation Sites and Trails BC, we have partnership agreements on 5 non-motorized rec trails in the Elk Valley. And these rec trails aren't like you imagine the your Trails Alliance's developing trails and outhouses and signs and bridges and all these things to increase recreation, onto the landscape. But it was the tool we had at the time to help protect sustainable public recreation into wild places, but also recognize the ecological importance of these wild places, and so through the Recreation Sites and Trails BC and the Forest and Range Practices Act, Section 58 and Section 57 of this act, we were able to apply for and have 5 non-motorized rec trails and some of the wildest places remaining in the Elk Valley.
Nice.
And we were able to make application for an e-bike prohibition on these trails again to try to get ahead of that technology. That it still allows mountain biking in these areas, but it's not really managed for mountain biking. We don't clear the trails like a mountain biking club would clear a trail. We clear it for hiking and equestrian use. So if you can step over a log, you're stepping over the log. We're not grooming. We're not grub hoeing. We're not, we're trying to leave it as natural as possible for a wilderness experience. And so, we have a trailhead sign, basically because we have to advertise the legislation that's there. But after that, you're on your own. And so again, we feel that's sustainable. We are able to lobby anytime there's an application for a commercial rec tenure or some kind of development in these wild places, because again, we're stakeholders now, and we have we managed to a certain section of what's called the recreation opportunity spectrum. Like some of us don't want to see people when we go in the backcountry. We're trying to get away from people.
That's why we're there. Yeah.
That's why we're there. But we still have, and everybody can go there. It's limited by the barrier of effort and your own comfort level. And so again, those are natural, kind of constraints into wild places. And try to find us online. You're not going to find much we're not advertising when we're clearing the trail. We're not advertising, there's a trailhead map. That's it. There's very little information shared. And I feel that's kind of one of our challenges of social media, that everybody wants to know where everybody is. Everybody wants to take places of where they are and show everybody how to get there. And then all the values you're looking for when you get there are no longer there. This
amazing, pristine, quiet, untouched place, like amazing. And then the next time you go, there's like 50
here's my trails app. Bink, here's how you get here. Here's a waterfall that doesn't have a beer can. Oh no, look at all the beer cans.
Yeah, it's the irony of it. It's you want to share, but sometimes the sharing goes too prolific, and then it's no longer the place that you want to go to.
There's a fine line of advocacy and loving it to death, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So that's where we try to balance with that particular organization. So
cool. You have a lot of hands into a lot of different pots, and you are such a wealth of knowledge, Bill. So thank you for coming on today and sharing. If people want to reach you, I will drop some contact information down below when the episode releases, so people can reach out if they have more questions about the Hornaday Wilderness Society, if they have more questions about BHA and BHA Canada, or any of the projects and things that are happening through that and that are coming in 2024. Is there any last things you want to share before I shoot you some rapid fire questions to wrap things up?
Actually, I wrote something down since I knew we were going to talk about horsepacking, and it was kind of my best description of, of what horsepacking is, and what it means to me, or what I've, kind of the philosophy I've kind of followed. And horsepacking is equal parts physical exertion and mental challenge. Horsepacking is also a celebration of horse training, horse behavior, and horse companionship. And it requires a special set of skills necessary for wilderness travel, particularly to be safe and come back from these wilderness adventures. That's kind of my summary of horsepacking and why I got into it, because it's kind of a lifelong thing, lifelong learning. And, I always encourage people to take on challenges and do hard things. As our society gets more and more convenient and more easy and more leisurely, take on challenges, do things the hard way, and you're a much fulfilled person because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. Okay, to wrap things up, Bill, I'm gonna ask you a few questions, and these are rapid fire. So these are as quick answers as you can. So, what is one thing you wish someone had told you when you started hunting?
Um, that I would be so addicted to it.
Watch out, you're
Like
gonna you're never gonna be able to give this one up.
I don't just dabble in anything. Like I go to the, I mean, whatever it is, gunsmithing, hand loading, fly fishing, horseshoeing,
Yeah,
furniture making, whatever, hunting, sheep hunting, whatever it is I do, I don't just dabble in it. It's got to be all in or not at all. That's why I
yeah,
don't want to start kayaking or something like
yeah,
that, because I'll be diving into the stikine before I know it. Don't want to
yeah,
go there.
yeah. So you'd wish somebody had told you, by the way, this is gonna absorb the rest
Careful,
of your life.
careful,
Yeah,
look out.
yeah. What is one thing that you should never do as a hunter out in the wilderness?
Never do as a hunter out in the wilderness. Break the law. Yeah. I mean,
And there are many. Yeah, there are
and
many. And no one's
there are many
watching except for
temptations
you.
out there when no one's looking, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
that's what defines ethics. Yeah.
Yeah. Who is one person that you look up to in the hunting and conservation world?
Mm. Oh boy, there's so many. Right off the top of my head, our ex CEO of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Lantoni. I mean, he
Mm,
was the one that just took our organization just to the next level. Just brought us as the fastest growing conservation organization in North America.
yeah.
That first 10 years of our existence, and or sorry, the middle 10 years of our existence, and he really took off with it. And so yeah, like just his ability to fire up the membership and fire up the issue, and get people engaged. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's got to be my modern day conservation hero right there.
Nice. What is the first animal you ever harvested?
6-point bull elk on the very first day I ever hunted elk on a
What?
backpack hunt
Get
into
out.
into a pretty wild place. Yeah, first day,
Oh
first
man.
day of elk hunting. Yeah,
That
with my buddy Mike Roach,
yeah.
who is my best man at my wedding. I was best man at his wedding.
Yeah.
The other co-discoverer of Quadidon Sinchi, the Iceman of the Tashishini, that guy.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a pretty epic start to
So I
your
kind of was hooked right off the get-go from the very
Yeah.
first day.
Yeah, yeah. What is your favorite hunting snack to take with you?
Peanut butter and bacon sandwiches.
Peanut butter and bacon sandwiches. Okay. Okay. I could get behind that. That I've never heard of that before, but I'm willing to try.
If you wanna jolt to the solar plexus, there
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah. When you hunt, do you wear a double layer of socks or one layer of socks?
I'm a 2-layer guy. Yeah, I'm a
Are you?
Thermax
Oh.
underlayer and a wool blend overlayer. Never had a blister in my life.
Okay. Oh, you were one of the rare double layers. Most people I've talked to
Yeah.
are one layers.
And I
Hmm.
just bought a brand new pair of boots, a pair of Zamberlanes. I haven't worn Zamberlanes before, and they fit me perfect. So
Nice.
I shop with, when I go boot shopping, I take my pairs of socks with me.
Yeah. Of course. Obviously.
Got it.
How else would you know if they fit?
Got it, exactly.
Last question. What's the one absolute essential that you must have on every single hunt?
On every single hunt. Oh, I got so many that I just have to have in my pack. That's just there kind of stuff, that it's the things that come out. My knife, just to
Mhm.
have that knife that's got the same feel in my hand, that comfort that I have with it. So when you're trying to take something apart in the dark in the snow with a headlamp that's burnt out, and you
Yeah.
still have that feel, you still
At
have
least
that
one thing's
comfort.
working.
One thing's
Yeah.
working. That knife is still comfortable in your hands,
Yeah.
prevents you
Amazing.
from cutting the
Amazing.
finger off. Yeah, I like to have that. And that was my raising the kids. When they first were able to hunt, that's the first thing they got, was a custom knife from me, and
Cool.
knowing that would be in their pack for every hunt for the rest of their life. And
Yeah.
so that was their first thing. And then when they got their hunting license, they got a rifle. So
Yeah.
we started
Yep.
with a knife, because I knew that knife would be there forever. Whereas the
Yeah.
rifle, come and go, you upgrade, you evolve.
Yeah. That's a really good timeless gift. That's awesome. Well, thank you again, Bill, so very much. Like I say, I'll drop your contact information down below for people to reach out.
Right on.
And I'm sure we'll chat again more, probably about sheep or hunting something else soon.
Well, I'll see you at the Wild Sheep Society of BC's Mountain Hunting Expo. Backcountry
Yes.
Hunters and Anglers BC chapter will have a table there.
Yep.
And so you'll be able to meet Justina and me there, and we can answer any of your questions.
Yeah. Come on out, folks. We'll be there and ready to chat.
I hope I didn't add any extra sponsors to this.
No, you're good, Bill. You're good.
Oh, good.
Thanks again.
Good. Right on.
Thanks for tuning in today to watch or listen, and make sure to hit that like or subscribe button to follow along wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any questions, comments, or reviews, please drop them down below. I will read them and I will get back to you. Or you can reach me at questions@entrypointhunting.com. If you know an expert or someone who offers great advice or is just growing rapidly in the field of hunting, angling, or conservation, please send them my way. I would love to reach out and connect with them. And until next time, friends, stay hungry.